Hi, my name is Christopher, and today I'm going to be responding to my opponent's claim that providing Plan B over the counter will have a positive effect. My opponent made two main claims that were the availability over the counter will ensure that the pill is taken as soon as possible, with two sub-arguments that say anyone can take the pill, and that there will be no use of the pill anyway because it's meant to use as soon as possible, as well as the second supporting claim that Plan B has no effect on sexual activity. I'm here to refute these claims and show that they may be invalid and they may not relate to the main claimant itself. I repeat again that my opponent's claim is that providing Plan B over the counter will have a positive effect. I didn't really see a correlation between the two supporting claims and the main claim. The availability over the counter would not really necessarily ensure that it would be taken as soon as possible. There's also a little circular reasoning in this, which I'll demonstrate later. And I also want to show that Plan B having no effect on sexual activity may be invalid. It may lead to an increase in sexual activity among teenagers and other kids, and that it may be affecting them negatively as well. My response to the first claim is that, again, simply because the pill is available to other students, does not really mean it's going to be a positive effect, or it can be taken immediately. In a study, it showed that only 60% of teenagers who are sexually active using condoms, or use condoms, according to the Atlantic writer David Mascherano, who also wrote the Daily Beast, LA Review of Books, Indianapolis Star, and other famous articles. Another study showed that over 2 in 5 women don't use contraceptives at all, while another study shows only 1 in 9, or 11% of people use an emergency contraceptive, which is what Plan B is. And this study was done by the Center of Disease Control in February of 2013. Again, this is just to iterate that just because a pill is something that's available to us does not really mean we would always use it or it can have a positive effect to us. To demonstrate the positive effect, I'm sure many of us have smartphones now. We have internet where we can play games which will help us procrastinate, stall, or really just get us off our work. Now that the internet is available to us, I'm sure many of our speakers have shown us that it isn't always beneficial to us just because it's more available. In a way, it can be negative to our effect, to our human being and well-beings. Again, the circular reasoning. My opponent's first claim again was that the availability over the counter will help ensure that the pill is taken as soon as possible. I found this to be kind of an example of circular reasoning because even if it wasn't displayed over the counter, it would still expire within 72 days. The pill is only good for 72 hours. The pill is only good for 72 hours, and regardless if it was sold over the counter or under the counter, it wouldn't really matter because it would expire anyway. My response to claim 2, which was Plan B has no effect on sexual activity, I found this to be invalid. Firstly, my opponent said that Plan B was like condoms, and condoms don't cause sexual activity, so why would Plan B? I found that there was no citation for this, so this was all just off an inference that she made. There's no reason to believe why Plan B are like condoms or why condoms don't cause more sexual activity in the first place. In actuality, in 2006, the age to receive a Plan B pill without a prescription was at age 18. In 2009, the age was then decreased to age 17 in order to get the Plan B pill without a prescription. And just last week, in 2013, the age has now been decreased to age 15 years old in order to get a Plan B without a prescription. There's no reason why the FDA and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention would allow this change unless they realize that kids were having more unprotected sex and would need this backup. It shows that the more that the age decreases, shows more kids are having sex, and as this continues, if more kids continue to have sex, they will start to rely on Plan B as a pill, as a backup, as a routine thing. And as according to the Center of Disease Control, that just stated, they said it is actually only an emergency contraceptive. It's not meant to be taken on the daily. If it's taken in a daily routine, it will have less of an effect every time you take it, and in case it can cause, not cause pregnancy, but it will simply disintegrate within the stomach. Lastly, my opponent showed an example that said, in Great Britain, from 2000 to 2002, women experienced more significant change than those who use emergency contraceptions. I found this to be a little irrelevant because the people of Great Britain are vastly different from the people in America. It doesn't really matter how the sales are doing in Great Britain because the sales in America are quite different. I found, and not to mention that the dates were from 2000 to 2002. That was about 10, 11 years ago, something like that. So I found that to be very irrelevant. Also, the example of the Plan B were like condoms, and condoms didn't cause sexual activity. So why would Plan B? Is also something called a hypothetical syllogism. If any of you have ever taken a critical thinking class, it's to say if we have subject P, subject Q, and subject R. Subject P is equal to Q, so Q is equal to R. That does not really mean that P would be equal to R. This could be something just like off the top of my head. If a building was like if a building was made out of metal and there are metal spoons, does that mean a building is a spoon? It wouldn't correlate with each other. Therefore, the condom example does not really work at all. So again, this is just to refute my opponent's claim that providing Plan B over the counter has a positive effect. It necessarily does not, just because it's over the counter, and does not always have a positive effect on everyone. Thank you.
Well, you start off identifying the main and secondary claims, and you're doing a little bit of the same thing that somebody was doing earlier. You're also previewing your responses to each of those points in advance, and it got a little bit confusing. But once you got to the main points, it's pretty straightforward. The argument that you're making on the first point, where you've got all the statistics about condom use and other kinds of contraceptives that are being used, you need to explain a little bit more clearly what the argument that you are making is. I know what the data says, but what's the inference that you're trying to make? It sounds ultimately like what you're saying is availability doesn't guarantee use, and therefore you can't really make the inference that Plan B would be used effectively. Okay, then say that. I think you just need to simplify that particular claim. The comparison to the internet, later on, when you're making this argument about the hypothetical syllogism and metal buildings not being equivalent to spoons, well, how does that make your internet comparison viable? That seems like you're almost contradicting yourself later on. The notion that it's circular reasoning on that first point, I'm not quite clear. What you need to be doing is you need to be showing that the prohibition or the current restrictions that require somebody to get a prescription for Plan B under these particular ages, that's not delaying their access to this. We didn't get any argument about that. Or you could be challenging the advocate's position, which seems to assume that it's delaying access to this, and you should be pointing out that they didn't have any evidence that demonstrated that. So then they're just making the assumption that access is going to increase the speed at which it's available, and I think that's the argument that you want to make on that particular point. On the next issue, the second issue, I thought you started off pretty well arguing that there's an absence of evidence, and then you kind of challenged the analogy that the advocate's making. I think you're making an inference here that suggests that because of the decreasing ages at which Plan B has been available, that's a demonstration that is in fact necessary at those points because kids are having sex at younger and younger ages. The inference that might be because they have this as access, I think, is a little bit of a stretch. The challenge to the Great Britain study, I think, needs to be a little bit stronger. The notion that they are substantially different than us is asserted, and the fact that it's a decade-old study, I'm not sure why that matters that much unless people's sexual behavior has changed dramatically in the last 10 years. Like I said, and then this criticism of the syllogism that you're making, I think you're trying to apply it to an argument that they're making, but I think it applies better to the argument that you made up above, so that's a little bit confusing. I think you need to simplify your claims a little bit more and make the statements more clearly declarative in a couple of points. But I like the evidence, and I like the fact that you directly went after some of the evidence and arguments that the advocate presented. All right, thank you.